This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to Death by Southwest. It is Thursday, which is not our typical recording day, but I recorded on Tuesday and then Zoom crashed and I lost the episode. And I will be completely honest, as I always am, often too honest on here. I just was not about to re-record it right then. Zoom crashed. I could not find the episode. It was gone. And I was like, well, it's not happening again today. And then yesterday, it just felt kind of forced because I had already recorded it once. And realistically, even though I spend a lot of time researching these, I don't generally practice them. And I know some of you are listening like, yeah, no shit, we can tell you don't practice it. But I don't. And so it kind of when I'm telling it, feels like I'm hearing the story as well, if that makes sense. So telling it again for a second time yesterday, it just felt forced. I decided to finish an episode that I've been working on. I was planning to save this for the 100th episode, which is coming up, but we're going to do it today. So, and then I'm going to save the one I did Tuesday for later on when it's not so fresh in my memory. What else? If there's anybody here from The Devil Within, which is my friend Brandon's podcast, I've been doing bonus episodes with him. If you are new here and you have come from The Devil Within, I cannot find the correct angle on this camera right now. Welcome. This podcast is definitely a lot different than Brandon's, but hopefully we'll find something you like here. I'm working on stopping saying and I'm doing a bad job so far. So let's just move right along. I will say that for new people, if you don't know, I used to do something called a sense of place where I'd kind of talk about the location in the Southwest where our episode took place. We've covered so many places in the Southwest that we have a lot of repeats. And so it seems a little redundant to give a sense of place for places that we've already covered. And that is today. Today, our story is going to take place right here in Arizona, where I am. And speaking of Arizona, let me just say it is hot here and it is too early to turn on the air conditioning. I refuse. So I have the side door open behind me, the front door open. You may hear birds, cars, and undoubtedly you will hear Indiana whining at some point. So please excuse all of that. I will try to remove as much as I can. Okay. So welcome back to Death by Southwest, the true crime podcast where we take a deep dive into the most chilling, bizarre, and unsettling murders that have happened in and around the American Southwest. And this week's case is no different than the others. It's brutal, it's terrifying, and it's quite heartbreaking, honestly. We are talking about the murder of 22-year-old Mercedes Vega, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Someone who had already survived one terrifying crime until, in the most calculated and sadistic way, someone came back and perhaps silenced her for good. So, who was Mercedes Vega? Her full name is Mercedes Mariana Vega. She was born March 10th, 2001 in Anchorage, Alaska. And if you are in your late 30s or 40s like I am, someone born in 2001 sounds like a baby. But she wasn't. The time that our story takes place, she was 22 years old. So Alaska wasn't where she grew up. Not too long after she was born, her and her mom, Erica, moved to Gilbert, Arizona, which is, so for reference, again, I'm in Tucson, which is very, very south Arizona. We're just about an hour north of Mexico. Gilbert is up in Phoenix, basically. It's a little bit, if you're driving here from Tucson, you're driving north to get up to Phoenix, you're going to hit Gilbert before you hit Phoenix. But it is up in the Phoenix area. So living in Gilbert, Erica, Mercedes' mom, eventually met and married a man named Tom Pillsbury. Love that name. The two families, Tom's family, Erica's family, formed a blended household. So Mercedes grew up actually not as a single child like she was. She had a house full of siblings. She had sisters, Jessica, Alexis, Mackenzie, and Shelby, and a younger brother named Finn. That is a full house. So even though Tom wasn't Mercedes' biological father, you would never know that if you saw them together. He really had a lot of love for her. He really considered her to be his daughter, his real daughter. And he at one point shared a conversation he had with her when she sorry guys, a conversation that he had with her when she was a teenager. He told her he wanted to step into the role of her father in every way, even if that meant sometimes he was going to be the one to kind of reprimand her or call her out when she needed to be called out, hold her accountable when she needed to be held accountable. And Mercedes understood this and didn't say much, but came back the next day and said, I want you to be my dad. And it was just the way that he apparently told this story was very, very heartwarming. The way I told it wasn't quite as heartwarming, but it sounds sweet. So, Mercedes, from the time that she was very young, she had a kind of a spark about her. She was very stubborn and had a determination about her, people would say like they have a fire in their belly. You've heard that description before. That's how she could be described. And Tom, I'm just going to call him her dad because that's what he considered himself to be, and she considered him to be, rather than stepfather, etc. So Tom remembers that she was very, very, very strong-willed. She wouldn't back down. She had a spirit about her. She was also very creative. She was kind of a showstopper. And she was also, I thought this was an interesting word to describe a child or teenager. She was very persuasive. So I heard this in a different podcast, and think this is a great story. When she was a kid, before she was even a teenager, she created a PowerPoint pitch presentation. A woman speaking to my heart. If you don't know, I love making pitch decks in PowerPoint. So she made a PowerPoint presentation to convince her family that they should go to Disney World. She didn't like beg or whine or bargain. She just made a pitch deck and pitched the idea, which I think is awesome. And as a teenager, she did it again, but this time she was kind of pleading her case to get a tattoo. So if you think about it, somebody who is that young and creating like persuasive pitch decks, she probably would have had a great career in marketing. And she loved the spotlight. She could sing. She was a great singer and she was not shy about it. Her dad, Tom, of course, I have written down stepdad, but I just think dad is better. He also tells a story of when she was 7 or 8 years old. They took a family trip to Hawaii and they were staying in a hotel right on the beach. And Mercedes saw that karaoke was happening down there. And she walked right up, signed herself up, and sang the national anthem right along with all the other people who were doing karaoke. I mean, there's tons of people watching, and she was just this little kid. And she just got up there and belted it out. And like everyone stopped, like, whoa, whoa, she was so confident. So that carried through into her adulthood. And that trip to Hawaii actually became, I don't want to say life changing, but it became a very important trip to her because Hawaii became a very special place. It became the place that she considered kind of her happy place. She would always say, my soul belongs in Hawaii. She loved the sun. She loved the water. She loved the ocean life, marine life. And she was always, whenever she was swimming in the ocean, she was always looking for sea turtles, dolphins, just, the kind of seeking out the magic that exists under the sea. Sorry, I can't help but think about The Little Mermaid when I say that. Mercedes had a very gentle soul. She loved animals. And again, all of this is just making me fall in love with this girl. She owned a horse for a while. She really cared deeply for everyone, every person, every creature around her. Um, and people who knew her would say that she looked out for people in her life, the animals, her friends, her family, the environment. She was always kind of saw herself as a protector. She stood up for other people and protected them, especially those who couldn't protect themselves. So after she finished high school at Arizona's East Valley, she moved about 30 minutes away to Tempe into her very first apartment that she had by herself. And it was a luxury apartment complex right on the Salt River, just east of the Sky Harbor Airport and across from ASU, so Arizona State University. I'm going to talk more about that apartment complex a little bit later, but in terms of kind of the whole complex. But her apartment specifically was very clean, organized. She liked things how she liked things. She liked things to be exactly in place and tidy. And she was really proud of this apartment. She had dreams of becoming a personal trainer, but she was saving up to take the classes to get her certification. And while she was doing that, she was working as a dancer at a local club to pay the bills. Now, when I hear dancer at a local club, I think strip club. I don't think it was that. I think it was just a nightclub. This was not her forever plan. This was her way to be independent, to have her own place, and to work towards the life that she was really hoping to have. So Mercedes didn't just talk about her goals, and she had a lot of goals. She was a list maker. Again, a girl after my heart. I love a list. So she had a goal list for the year, and the first item was go back to school to get certified in personal training. She was also very spiritual, and she really believed in all things like universe and higher power and higher plan. And she wrote in a journal frequently. And one of the last things she wrote in her journal was this quote, I am divinely guided and divinely protected. The entirety of my existence is all for the highest good. I'm allowing the universe to handle everything for me. I recognize the divine is orchestrating all that happens, even in my most tragic moments. I am being divinely led to my higher purpose. The universe has perfect timing. And at the bottom of the entry, she signed her name and wrote her angel numbers 333. So she believed that that number showed up when you were aligned with your truth and when you were being watched over by something bigger. So I didn't exactly know what angel number, like I've heard angel numbers, but I didn't exactly know what they were. So I just a little brief aside on angel numbers, they are repeating number sequences like 111, 222, 333. And people believe that they are messages from the spiritual realm or the universe. Many people view them as signs of guidance, protection, or affirmation, especially during transitional moments. And each number has its own symbolic meaning. 333, for example, is often associated with alignment, encouragement, and divine support. You can see these numbers on clocks, receipts, license plates, or other everyday places. And when you're seeing them repeatedly, they're thought to hold significance for that person who sees them. So if I'm seeing, well, I'm not going to explain that. You guys are very smart. I don't need to continue explaining this. So Mercedes really believed in these numbers. You know how people, I have friends who are like, oh, it's 11:11, make a wish. I wish I believed in that. I don't. But let's continue. So our story begins on Sunday, April 16th, 2023 in Tempe. It was a warm, quiet spring night. And Mercedes was 22 at the time, and she spent the first part of the evening getting ready in her apartment. She lived, like I said, her apartment complex was just a little bit east of Phoenix. She had a white Dodge Charger. She parked it in the parking garage for her apartment complex, like she always did. And then she went in her apartment. She was getting ready to go out with her friends this night. And she sent her last text message at 8:54. I do not have that text message, but just to kind of keep the timeline. So around 9:15, she left her apartment and began walking towards her car in the parking garage to go meet some friends at Dave and Buster's. Surveillance footage captured what would be the last known images of Mercedes alive. She was wearing a black crop top, ripped jeans, and white tennis shoes, and she had kind of a big purse that she was carrying on her shoulder. The surveillance footage shows her walking through the garage. She is looking down at her phone. Doesn't appear to be anything unusual. She doesn't seem hesitant. She doesn't seem scared. She's just walking calmly, unbothered, looking at her phone. It seems like she has no idea what's about to happen because she doesn't. You can just tell by watching this footage. Her parents watched the footage a couple times and said it's even more heartbreaking because she's just oblivious to what is about to happen to her. She didn't seem nervous. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She looked totally at ease. Her dad, Tom, said, "You can see when she comes out that she does not have a care in the world. She's not paying attention to her surroundings." Now, I don't think that he's faulting her for this, and nor am I. However, I always say this. I feel like I've said it on here. Being aware of your surroundings is the most important thing you can do. I typically say as a woman, but as anyone, to not be staring down at your phone, to be aware of what's happening around you is the best way you can protect yourself from something happening. Now, in familiar places where you walk 1,000 times, like her parking garage, walking to her car, I don't think that she was thinking, I need to be aware of my surroundings. She's done it a million times. So it's understandable that she was just looking at her phone casually. And she has no idea that someone could be watching her or waiting for her. The grainy footage, the last moment we see her turn the corner from the staircase. She comes down the stairs, she turns the corner. And what happened next, we don't have on video, but we know that she was ambushed as she turned that corner. It was fast, it was violent, and it was very vicious. Somewhere after she turned the corner, she was struck across the head with blunt force. It was so severe that it left blood and brain matter on the concrete where she was struck. This wasn't like a scuffle. There was no fight, nothing like that. Nothing appeared to be like that. This was an intentional, from what it seemed, brutal attack. Her mom, Erica, actually visited the apartment complex about 3 days after this happened, and the blood was still there, and she could see the imprint of her daughter's tennis shoes kind of like frozen there, just proof that Mercedes had been standing there when she was hit. And her mom had said something along the lines of that she could literally see her daughter's final steps captured in blood. After that, it is believed that Mercedes was forced into a car and driven away. Both her Dodge Charger and a Chevy Malibu that surveillance footage caught entering the garage 30 minutes prior to this. So her Dodge Charger and this Chevy Malibu left the garage at the same time, one after the other. So the implication here is that whoever did this was prepared. Somebody came prepared for this attack because we can assume that after Mercedes was hit so hard that brain matter was on the ground, that she probably wasn't driving her own car. And just like that, she was gone and she was never seen alive again. The next morning at 12:30 a.m., so very early in the morning, on April 17th, a 911 call came in from a concerned motorist who said a car, a Chevy Malibu, was on fire off of Interstate 10 near Tonopah, Arizona. Pronunciation, I don't know. About 60 miles from Mercedes' apartment. Now, Tonopah, however you say it, is kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of just like the middle of the desert with a long stretch of highway there. It's about 50 minutes west of the Phoenix area. So when first responders arrived and managed to put out the fire, they started kind of surveying what was there in the wreckage. And what they found was horrifying. In the back seat, they discovered human remains. The rear of the car had been completely drenched in lighter fluid. In the front seat, they found latex gloves and bottles of bleach, which indicated to them that someone was trying to cover their tracks and destroy any evidence. Not too long after the car was discovered and forensics and everything came, the victim, the body in the back of the car, was identified as 22-year-old Mercedes Vega. Because of her job as a dancer, she had previously been required to submit her fingerprints. So, on second thought, maybe it was a strip club. It doesn't even matter at this point. But law enforcement was able to ID her very quickly based on these fingerprints because her fingerprints were in the system. And even though she was badly burned, they were still able to lift fingerprints. That morning, the police showed up at her parents' house, Erica and Tom, and this very quickly became the worst moment of their lives when they were told that their daughter had been murdered. It made no sense to them. Just the night before, she had been just carefree, walking to her car. She had her whole life out of her, and they couldn't really comprehend this right away. Unfortunately, the horror of this didn't stop for them with the news itself of the murder. It was everything that came or didn't come afterwards. They were, of course, told that an investigation was underway. But beyond that, there were really no updates. There was no timeline. There were no clear answers. They weren't allowed to see her remains. They weren't given any of her belongings from the night that she died. And in fact, a lot of the details of her case, of the crime scene, of everything that happened, they didn't learn them from the police. They learned them from a newspaper article like weeks later, which seems appalling to me. Another appalling fact was that it took 6 months before they finally received the autopsy report, which why? I understand that the medical examiner's office and the police and like there are so many crimes disgustingly that law enforcement and you know officials can't keep up with it, but 6 months for a brutal murder of a 22-year-old, it seems shocking to me. When they did finally get the results from the autopsy report, it was awful. It confirmed that she had suffered a massive head injury in the parking garage. She had also been shot in her upper right arm. And the most devastating part was that it confirmed that she had died from smoke inhalation. So, after being attacked, after being beaten, after being shot, that means she was still alive when they put her in the backseat of that car and set it on fire. Uh, there's no way to know if she was conscious or not. And with every fiber in my being, I hope she was not. What police gathered from this is that she was obviously burned alive, and this was no accident. This was a deliberate attempt to destroy not only her body, but any evidence along with her. Now, aside from that very troubling fact that the autopsy revealed, there was another one, maybe even a more concerning fact, and that was the discovery of bleach. Now, we know that there was bleach in the car. I already said that. But I'm not talking about just in the car or spilled nearby. I'm talking about inside of her body. They found bleach in her throat, which immediately raises so many questions. Not just how she died, because from what I gather, it's a little bit difficult to determine if it was the blunt force trauma, if it was, well, they said smoke inhalation, but there was a lot of horrible things done to her body. So a combination of all of those things and this bleach that was likely poured down her throat also probably had something to do with it. But more so than like contributing to the cause of death, it's the why. Like why she was tortured very clearly, but why? So I'm not the only one who just is thinking this and just said why like 17 times. Everyone else was thinking this. And, when people don't have answers, they speculate. And so there was a lot of speculation here that the bleach indicated that someone was trying to silence her. They were trying to, prove something, send some type of message. So perhaps she came across something she wasn't supposed to, whether it be at work, in her personal life. She could have overheard a conversation or witnessed something or shared a concern with somebody and that person didn't like it. I mean, it's endless what could have happened, but the bleach seemed to indicate that her death wasn't just a murder. It was quite possibly a message. Again, just speculation, but it's hard to ignore how personal this felt. It was a deliberate attempt to punish her is what it seemed like, and then erase her. And it felt very calculated. Her mom, Erica, said, "Why wouldn't you just shoot her in the garage? She was tortured. There's no other words for it." And her dad, Tom, said a similar thing. Whether it's because she knew something or was about to expose someone, I don't know. But these people tortured my daughter. I do believe she was targeted. Because I believe I have this somewhere later on, but it feels more appropriate to say it now. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing seemed to be taken from her. Uh, it just seemed like a brutal attack. But why? So, more from the autopsy and toxicology report. Mercedes only had caffeine and THC in her system, so smoked a little pot perhaps. She wasn't drugged. She wasn't out of it. Nothing like that. She had really nothing in her. I mean, caffeine and THC is essentially nothing. She was just heading out for a night with her friends. So the timeline also makes this confusing. There was about a 3 hour window between when she was last seen in her apartment garage and when the burning car was discovered. So, what happened in those 3 hours? Again, speculation is that she was probably taken somewhere else, perhaps moved between vehicles, between locations, because we see her on the surveillance footage and then we don't see her or the cars for 3 hours, which is weird. There's cameras everywhere. You can essentially map someone's every move if they're in a vehicle because there's cameras just about everywhere on houses, on businesses, on highways, on freeways, on streets, everywhere. But it seemed like she just like these cars and her just disappeared. Again, questions. Questions galore. Was she conscious? Did she know her attacker? Did they say anything to her? Where was she during those 3 hours and what happened aside from some pretty clear torture? And then, as if all of this is not enough, sorry guys, I'm trying to be comfortable on my yoga ball. It's not happening tonight. um, so, as if all of this confusion wasn't enough confusion, there was also confusion about the car situation. So initially, Mercedes' family was told that she was found inside her own vehicle, which was a 2019 Dodge Charger. That wasn't true. Remember, we already know that she was found in a Chevy Malibu, a completely different car. And it turns out that the day after her murder, the police actually called Mercedes' family to say that her car had been located. It was parked illegally behind a restaurant called Culinary Dropout, about 5 minutes from her apartment. Again, it's fair to assume she probably didn't move it herself because she was attacked before she ever made it to her car. So if she didn't park it there, who did? Why would they park it there? When did they park it there? Okay, let's recap. So she's attacked in her garage. She's put into a Chevy Malibu, we believe, not her car. That car ends up in the desert, burning with her inside, dead. And her car is driven off by someone and abandoned behind a random restaurant. Why wouldn't the killer just kill her in her own car or burn her own car? Like, why would they burn their car? We can assume that's their car. If they were trying to avoid being traced, wouldn't you just kill her in her car? That's not connected to you? Other questions that the family had, they were wondering, like, okay, well, and I'm wondering because I don't have the answer. Was her car like? Did they process her car before they gave it back to the family? Did they find any evidence in her car? Was there DNA in that matched in both vehicles? Again, Her family, nor do I at this point, have those answers. And then there's one more weird detail here, as if we don't have enough. Mercedes on her Charger had vanity plates, like personalized license plates. Now, these tend to stand out, at least to me. I mean, if I'm driving, I notice when somebody has, you know, hot stuff on their license plate or whatever they have on their license plate. It stands out. You notice them. And her license plate read LUV 333. Those angel numbers again. Now just got done saying that there's cameras everywhere, which we all know. We're always being watched. And even with those plates, which are pretty distinguishable, so there are, I'd imagine, tons of white Dodge Chargers in the greater Phoenix area with, millions of residents. But those plates make it a fairly easy car to spot. But no cameras in all of Tempe caught her car being driven or parked that night. Not a single sighting, not a single blip on any camera radar, which is weird. Okay, let's jump to talking about her apartment complex because Mercedes loved her apartment. As I mentioned, she had it decorated, designed, organized exactly how she wanted. She was really proud of being on her own, paying for her own place, and she really considered her apartment her safe space. So after this happened with Mercedes, the management team at the building, which let's just call, I want to call them some really terrible things, but I won't. They sent out like a very kind of glossed over memo to all of the residents. Because, I mean, think about it. Somebody is attacked and then winds up dead. Several hours later, they're attacked in that apartment complex. I don't know. I feel like the residents have a right to know that. While there was no mention of violence or murder, no details about it, nothing in this memo that went out to residents. It was a short message saying that Tempe police had been on site conducting an investigation on April 18th, which is not even the correct date. And that's all that it said. They assured residents that they were going to cooperate fully with law enforcement. They asked for residents to be, quote unquote, patient and understanding. And they closed the memo by saying they'd provide updates when possible, which never actually happened. They never provided any updates. Now, obviously, I think we can all understand that they don't want to broadcast that a murder happened on their premises to one of their residents. That's not good PR. However, the people who live, fine, don't broadcast it publicly, but the people who live there have a right to know. If someone was murdered in my little, like, I don't know what you call it because these are freestanding places, but like there's a bunch of little casitas here. If someone was murdered here, you better believe I want to know about it. I mean, I don't want to, but yeah. So residents didn't even find out about this from the apartment complex. They found out on the news or on social media. And another shitty thing about this management team is that Mercedes family, they were putting up flyers, asking for people for information. Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? Stuff like that. They put them up around the complex and management would keep taking them down, which is so fucked up. Sorry. I try not to swear too much on here because it really offends some people and I don't want to do that, but terrible. Okay. As if we don't have enough like kind of question marks and disturbing facts and figures happening here. Um, I think it's kind of disturbing. Maybe disturbing is the wrong word. It's interesting the contrast between the way that this building kind of looks, like how it comes off, and what actually happens at this building, aside from the murder. So the building, I looked it up, and if you if you live in Arizona, I don't know about other states in the Southwest. I mean, I know in Georgia, place like apartment complexes, luxury apartment complexes with that are kind of like sprawling and offer all these amenities and are very upscale, but then are often filled with college students. Like at least I wasn't a college student, so maybe that's why, but I didn't really experience that in Georgia. But I do know that exists tenfold here in Tucson and in Phoenix. So this is not like this is a very common thing. There are a lot of very large luxury communities that are super modern and they look like a resort. Like it looks like you're staying at an actual resort style pool, cabanas, fitness centers, movie theaters, coffee bars, lounges, pool table, like everything, a gym, And if you look online, this apartment complex says that it's gated. It's a gated community. In my mind, a gated community is fully gated. I can feel fully safe because the whole place is gated. That's not the case here. It's partially gated. The buildings and garages, yes, they have somewhat controlled access with gates, but anyone can drive into the complex off the street. So from the outside, it's very pristine looking, resort style looking, but that's not actually the case, which actually doesn't surprise me with where it's located. But on Reddit, there's a lot of people who talk about this crime and this apartment complex saying that, yeah, it looks nice, but it's really not that safe. There's a lot of crime in and around this apartment complex. And because it is right across the street from ASU, I'll be honest, I visited ASU a lot when I was in school here in Tucson, and it's not a great area. It's not the nicest area. Now, that was a long, long, long time ago. So perhaps it has improved. But based on this story that took place in 2023, it doesn't sound like it's improved. It's pretty crime ridden. And, Reddit users talking about their cars got broken into, things were stolen from their car, golf clubs, all kinds of personal items. And, you know, the area around ASU, it is known to be a little shady, but it is to people who have been there, who live there. If you look it up online, you would never know that ASU's campus is kind of in like a sketch part of Tempe, and Tempe in general is kind of sketchy. But obviously, they're not advertising that. Bad PR, similar to the apartment complex where she lived. So the garage, it's only one main structure. Now, there's apparently about 300 units here, and there are tons of outdoor parking spots. So, all around this apartment complex, it's not like this is in the middle of nowhere. There's tons of foot traffic, tons of people, tons of students, tons of people leaving the bars, people walking to class, people walking their dogs. I mean, like, there's a lot of people around. This is not a solitary, that's not the right word, but you get what I'm saying. So that to me, that's strange that someone felt confident enough to not only figure out a way to drive into this garage with security cameras present, knowing that there are tons of people out and about and around. So they got into the garage and then they also attacked her in the garage. This is basically on the college campus. There are people everywhere. So this is all just pointing to that this is not an impulsive kind of opportunistic crime. This is something that has been planned and targeted. As I said, for a long time, the family didn't have answers and the questions were piling up. I've already mentioned tons of questions. Once they found out that the car that she was killed in wasn't hers, they wanted to know, was it a stolen vehicle? Did they have a license plate off of the Chevy Malibu? How much of this person or people's movements were caught on camera? All unknown. Her family didn't get any answers to any of this. We do know this, though, that for the entire year following her death, her family was relentless. Every single month, they canvassed the area near the apartment and the restaurant where her car was found, Culinary Dropout. They handed out flyers, they talked to people, they asked questions. And when that didn't get them really anywhere, they organized a peaceful protest and press conference outside the Phoenix police headquarters. They were demanding that the case should get more attention. They teamed up with Silent Witness, the anonymous tip line that helps to solve violent crimes in Arizona, and they just never gave up. They really felt And a lot of people felt like they were the only ones investigating their daughter's murder. So we are a little bit more than a year post Mercedes murder. And her family still has no answers. No one is coming forward. They're starting to feel like no one's ever going to be held accountable for this terrible, terrible crime until November 2024, when everything changed. A man named Sincere Hayes, 22-year-old man from Chattanooga, Tennessee, was arrested. He wasn't picked up in connection to Mercedes murder. He was picked up on he was arrested on unrelated charges. And once he was booked, his fingerprints were taken. And that's when things started to crack open here. His prints matched one print collected by Maricopa County Sheriff's Office investigators from a bloody grocery bag found in Mercedes' abandoned Dodge Charger. So remember earlier, her family was wondering, like, did forensics get into her car? Did they find anything? Was there DNA? And they never got those answers until now. Obviously, the answer is yes. They did get into the car. They did collect DNA. Why couldn't they tell her Mercedes family about it? Like, I still don't understand that. Okay, so who is Sincere? Sincere? I think I'm saying that right. Sincere Hayes. He was already in jail at the time of his arrest for Mercedes murder. So he was arrested for Mercedes murder, but he, like I said, was picked up on unrelated charges. He was being held in Hamilton County. He had been arrested in both May and June of 2024 for things like theft of property, possession of a handgun while under the influence, and possessing a firearm with the intent to go armed. I don't know what that means. Basically, he's not like a clean cut guy who just accidentally got picked up. He had a well documented criminal history. And, when his fingerprints went into the system, they lit up the Mercedes case. And so, like I said, but the moment that police had this match and were able to connect it to Mercedes murder, everything started to kind of unfold. So, detectives obtained a 9-page search warrant and they began to piece together how Sincere even got to Arizona. Like he's in, he was arrested just now in Tennessee. That's where he's from, where he's been. So what the hell is he doing in Arizona? Well, they discovered that his plane ticket from Tennessee to Phoenix had been purchased with a credit card belonging to someone who had previously rented an apartment to a man named Cudjoe Young. And I'm probably saying that wrong, but we're going to go with it. Now, Cudjoe Young is a name that's been kind of quietly in the background of this case, and I have not mentioned him. You did not miss something. I did not mention him yet on purpose. He robbed Mercedes. Cudjoe Young robbed Mercedes in 2020 at gunpoint. And it just so happened that she was preparing to testify in the case against him in May of 2023, which was not long after she was murdered. 2 months. She was murdered 2 months prior to when she was supposed to testify against Cudjoe. Now, Cudjoe Young was wearing an ankle monitor at the time when Mercedes was killed. He was not physically in Arizona when Mercedes was killed. So they have nothing to charge him with at this point, outside of all the things he's been charged with prior, because he's wearing an ankle monitor. But they did find some ties between Cudjoe Young, again, who robbed Mercedes at gunpoint in 2020, and Sincere Hayes, whose fingerprints were found in Mercedes' car after she was murdered. And they couldn't ignore these things. So they found records for the airfare for Sincere Hayes that was purchased back in early March of 2023. Then on March 17th, a friend of Cudjoe's created an account on OfferUp using a fake name. And that account was used to purchase a Chevy Malibu, the same model and color that was later found burned in the desert with Mercedes inside. So using OfferUp logs, cell phone records, and IP addresses, the investigators were able to trace the timeline, which we kind of already know, that just before 9:30 p.m. on April 16th, this is new surveillance footage that shows Mercedes Dodge Charger being abandoned near Culinary Dropout in Tempe. Now, It then shows the Chevy Malibu, which Mercedes was burned inside of, leaving the area shortly after. Now, why was this footage not shown to Mercedes' parents? Why was this not disclosed earlier? I mean, we're talking this is almost a year and a half later after her murder. That bloody grocery bag that was found in Mercedes' car, they found that and tested it, got the print off of it at the time of her murder. But initially, it yielded no leads. I mean, this Sincere Hayes was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So there were no matches, I guess, here in Arizona. But when he was arrested a year later, the match came. So he must not have had his prints in there before her murder. Also, the same credit card that was used to book Sincere's flight, remember it was Cudjoe's credit card that booked his flight, was also used to purchase other plane tickets at the same time, which tells police that probably one other person, if not more, was involved in this, who traveled separately. So this was not just, this obviously wasn't done by one person. We know that because the Chevy Malibu and the Dodge Charger left the garage at the same time. Mercedes wasn't driving. So Sincere was driving one of them. We don't know who is driving the other. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office released a public statement confirming that this case is still active and ongoing. This was just in February. They said the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is actively and intently investigating the death of Mercedes Vega from April 17th, 2023. One arrest has been made, Sincere Hayes of Tennessee, and other investigative leads are being investigated. It is believed this incident is in relation to other crimes and investigations with multiple agencies. So the investigators are not yet ready to disclose additional information due to the complexity and delicate nature of this case and others, which, like, they haven't released anything for a year and a half. So shouldn't be shocking. It's annoying, but not shocking. So basically they're saying this case is far from over. So Sincere appeared in court for the first time in February of 2025. So just last month. And he's expected to return next month on April 15th. Prosecutors have until May 14th to decide whether or not they'll seek the death penalty for him. And in the meantime, Mercedes' family is encouraging the public and anyone who can and is willing to show up in court and stand with them. They are also planning to build a memorial for Mercedes along the stretch of I-10 where she was found. And they're hoping that this space will not only honor her life, but serve as a reminder of what still has not been answered. Because even though they have one arrest, which is certainly better than a year ago, they do not certainly have justice yet. So what they are thinking and what most people are thinking at this point is that because Mercedes stood up for something wrong that was done against her, that she was then silenced in a incredibly horrific way. And so, if anything, I think that this story definitely reminds us that victims need protection and witnesses need safety. She should have been protected prior to testifying in this case. She deserved both of those. And that is it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this or other episodes, please subscribe, leave a review. You can find us on Instagram. You can email us. All of that information is in the show notes. And until next time, stay safe, and we will see you next week for another story from the dark side of the Southwest. Bye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, "Good night and good luck."